Are Europe and China headed towards a trade war? It increasingly looks like that. Europe fired the first shot last week. It imposed tariffs on Chinese electric cars. Now China has fired back. Its target is pork supplies from the EU. Beijing has launched an investigation into them. So it's EVs versus pork. Beijing has opened what it's calling an anti-dumping investigation. On what grounds? The same as Europe's complaints against Chinese cars. Here's what China says. Europe is dumping cheap pork into the Chinese market, and this is hurting domestic suppliers. The complaint has been filed by the China Animal Agriculture Association. Sounds like a nondescript body, but clearly they serve a political purpose because China's Commerce Ministry has responded swiftly to their complaint. The ministry says it will look into last year's pork imports from the EU. The investigation could take up to 1 year to finish, and it could be extended by another 6 months if the Chinese investigators want to.
In accordance with the relevant Chinese laws and regulations and World Trade Organization rules, Chinese domestic industries have the right to file an application to open an investigation into European dairy and pork imports to maintain normal market competition and order and safeguard their own legitimate rights.
This is obviously not a coincidence. It comes less than a week after Brussels made its move to limit the imports of Chinese EVs into Europe. They're grappling with an oversupply. Electric cars from China have been piling up at European ports. Some of them have been stuck there for as long as 18 months. Manufacturers are struggling to sell these cars now. So Europe wants to slow down imports. And how will they do that? By slapping a duty of up to 38% on Chinese cars. Beijing has been livid about this. It threatened to fight Europe with a lawsuit.
The actions by the European side are suspected of violating WTO rules and are naked protectionist behavior. China reserves the right to file a suit to the WTO and take all necessary measures to resolutely defend the rights and interests of Chinese companies.
So first, China talked about a legal battle. Now it has launched a probe into pork from Europe. It's a tit-for-tat move. The probe makes little sense otherwise. In 2023, China imported $282 billion worth of goods from the EU. $282 billion. Do you know what was the value of the pork imports? Less than $2 billion. And most of the supply came from just 3 countries. Spain, Denmark and the Netherlands. So pork is just a fraction of their overall trade, and targeting pork imports will not really hurt the EU financially. So this probe is about making a statement, a pressure tactic of sorts from Beijing to force European states to oppose the tariffs on Chinese cars. And Beijing has a small window of opportunity to do this. EU states get a vote on these tariffs. There are 27 countries in the European Union. If 15 of them oppose the plan, if 15 of them vote against the plan, it could be shot down. Perhaps that's what China is aiming for, to exploit divisions and political fault lines in Europe. And it's not unachievable because there are already rumblings of dissent. Take Germany, for instance. It opposes EV tariffs on China. Spain, too, sounds concerned. It is one of the major sellers of pork to China. Yesterday, Madrid issued a statement. It said Spanish officials are working with the EU to avoid any counter tariffs on pork sales. The car industry, too, is pushing back against the plan.
The industry also made quite clear statements that tariffs, as suggested now by the EU, will not increase the competitiveness of the automotive industry. And therefore, we rather advocate for investing into the competitiveness of the European Union rather on trying to protect the auto industry. And I mean, you cannot protect the automotive industry only in the European Union if they are all over the world in all global markets.
It's a tricky challenge for Brussels. China's influence on Europe's automobile market runs deep. I'll give you another example. BYD is the biggest seller of EVs in the world. BYD is a Chinese company. It is also a sponsor for the Euros, the continent's premier football tournament. It's being sponsored by a Chinese car maker, not European auto giants, and that should tell you something. China plans to fight this back. It will challenge European tariffs, and if Europe fails to respond like a union, it will be a losing battle.